Hello everybody! Today I'm going to teach you how to play Pokemon TCG. Pokemon trading card game is a card game that simulates a trainer battle between two Pokemon trainers in a stadium to try and take home all the prizes. So anyway, the object of the game. The object of the game is to get 6 prizes. Later during setup, you're going to learn how to put your prizes out, and you'll start with 6 prizes. As soon as you draw your 6th prize, you win the game. How do you get prizes? You win prizes by knocking out your opponent's Pokemon. For each of your opponent's Pokemon that you knock out, you get 1 prize card. How do you normally knock out your opponent's Pokemon? So how you knock out your opponent's Pokemon is attacking with your active Pokemon. So on the battlefield, there's going to be 1 active Pokemon. You might have several benched Pokemon, and usually your active Pokemon will be attacking. And when your Pokemon deals enough damage equal to the HP of your opponent's active Pokemon, or sometimes benched Pokemon, for each Pokemon that gets knocked out, you'll get to draw a prize card. On the field. So, when you're looking at the Pokemon field, there's a bunch of different areas. The first area is the active Pokemon area. So this area is basically where your active Pokemon is, and the active Pokemon is the Pokemon that can attack. Your bench. Your bench can hold 5 Pokemon. Your bench can hold 5 total Pokemon at a time. And then there's your deck, your discard pile, and your prize area. Types of cards. So there's a bunch of different cards in the Pokemon TCG. So the first type of card is a Pokemon card. It comes in 2 flavors, Basic and Evolution, but the most important one that you need to know for starting off a game is Basic. So Basic Pokemon are Pokemon that can just be played onto the field, and there's no restriction as to when they can be played. Evolution cards sometimes have particular restrictions because they are stages of various other Pokemon, so certain Pokemon will have to evolve from other specific Pokemon. One example is, for example, Pikachu evolves into Raichu. Another example of Pokemon that might go from a basic to a stage 1 to a stage 2 is Piplup evolves into a Prinplup, and then it evolves into an Empoleon. Energy cards. There's various different kinds of energy, and the types of energy allow you to power your Pokemon to do Pokemon attacks, as well as retreating and pay certain other costs. The handful of different types of energy that exist in the game are Grass, Fire, Water, Lightning, Psychic, Fighting, Darkness, Metal, Fairy, Dragon, and then there's a symbol for colorless energy, which usually implies that you can power it with any kind of energy. And colorless energy is more or less type agnostic. Trainer cards. Trainer cards are the types of cards that you'll be playing to try and help you win your Pokemon battle, and they come in different subtypes. So there's items, which are just play, you use the ability, and then they get put in your discard pile. Supporters, which, similar to like items, when you play a supporter trainer, you get to resolve its ability, and then you put it into your discard pile. The only restriction is that supporters can only be played once per turn. So if you have 3 or 4 supporters in your hand, you can only play 1, and then the rest will have to wait in your hand until later. Stadium trainer cards are pretty much trainer cards that will stay in play. Note that there's only 1 stadium for the entire field, so whether it's yours or your opponent's, there's only 1 active at a time. You can only play it so long as the stadium name is a different name than any existing stadium already in play. So if your opponent plays a stadium, it will overwrite your stadium if yours was the one already in play. If you play one, you can overwrite your opponent's, just as long as it's not of the same name. Alright, setup. During setup, you'll want to shuffle your 60-card deck, draw the top 7 cards to make your hand, check to see if you have any basic Pokemon. If you don't have any basic Pokemon, you are forced to reshuffle your hand. At this point, if your opponent would like, they're free to draw 1 additional card from their deck as kind of a penalty to you if you don't have a basic Pokemon in your hand. After you draw on your hand of 7 cards and you verify that there is at least 1 basic Pokemon in your hand, you can put that into your active Pokemon area face down as your active Pokemon. And you can put up to 5 more face down onto your bench, also all have to be basic Pokemon as well. Then after this setup is complete, put 6 cards from the top of your deck into your prize area. These are the prizes that you are trying to obtain in order to win the game. Once all of this setup is done on both sides, both players will flip up all of their face-down Pokemon, and then the game can begin. Randomly determine who goes first, and that person will take the first turn. What to do during a turn. So during your turn, you can do several different things, but you have to follow these steps in these specific order. The first part of a turn is drawing a card. Draw a card first. The second part of a turn is when you can do various different actions. And then the third part of a turn, which is the last part of the turn, is attacking. Once you've attacked with your active Pokemon, your turn's over, and you can't do anything else until your next turn. Alright, during the draw a card segment of your turn, just take one card from the top of your deck and put it in your hand. Alright, during the second part of your turn, when you can take various actions, there's a handful of different actions that you can take. The actions that you can do are putting more basic Pokemon from your hand onto your bench. You can evolve your Pokemon. Now just remember, each time that you evolve a Pokemon, you can only evolve that Pokemon once per turn. So you can't go from basic to stage 1 to stage 2 all in one turn. You must spend one turn with the basic Pokemon already on the field, evolve it to a stage 1, wait for a turn, and then evolve it to a stage 2. Also note that you can't evolve a Pokemon on your first turn. This applies to both players. You can attach an energy card to any of your Pokemon. Attaching an energy card is one of the actions that's limited to you once per turn, so you can't add more than one energy each turn. Remember, when you attach an energy, it could be attached to any of your Pokemons. You can play trainer cards. Once again, you can play as many trainer cards as you would like, but if you would like to play a supporter, you can only do that once per turn. You can use as many Pokemon abilities as you would like. There are various types of abilities that will tell you when they can be used, and sometimes how often as well. Pokemon abilities can be used typically once per turn, but sometimes there's some abilities that will let you use it multiple times per turn. The difference between an ability and an attack. So if you take a look at a card, let's look at Fion. Fion has both an ability and an attack. So the ability is clearly marked as an ability. This ability is called Whirlpool Suction. And then the attack is called Rain Splash. So Rain Splash requires specific type of energy to power, and that shows that it is an attack. The attack will have a name, usually damage, sometimes just an effect under it. The ability will be clearly marked ability. Let's take a look at Piplup. Piplup has an attack called Bubble Hold, and it requires 3 water energy to use on it. It'll do 80 damage, and it also has an extra piece of text that says if the defending Pokemon is a basic Pokemon, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn. You can also retreat your active Pokemon. The retreat cost of each Pokemon is in the bottom right-hand corner. What happens when you actually retreat your Pokemon is you have to pay the retreat cost. Basically, paying the retreat cost is discarding energy from that Pokemon. You discard energy equal to the retreat cost from that Pokemon, from the active Pokemon. And then you're going to swap it with another Pokemon that's currently on your bench. And then that Pokemon becomes your new active Pokemon. And then the final and third part of your turn is attack. So in order for you to attack, you have to have enough energy on the Pokemon in order to use the attack. If there's multiple attacks you can use, make sure that you specify the name of the attack that you're doing. Let's take a look at this Pikachu, for example. This Pikachu has 2 attacks, and it can be powered with colorless energy, so it doesn't have to be lightning energy, but it could be of any type of energy. And its first attack is called Pika Draw, and its second attack is called Quick Attack. So if you end up using the Pika Draw, note that the attack doesn't have a number on the far right side. Therefore, when you use this attack, it doesn't do any actual damage to your opponent. You just get the attack effect. So in this case, it's draw a card. If you take a look at Quick Attack, it requires 2 energy on Pikachu to use, and it will do 20 damage. And you'll get to flip a coin. If it's heads, it gets to do 20 more damage. So it's either 20 or 40 damage. Normally when you're doing attacks and there is a damage value, you will have to check the opposing active Pokemon's weakness and resistance. So if you take a look at a Pokemon card, let's look at this Pikachu once again. It has a weakness to fighting Pokemon, and its damage is ×2. So if you were going to be doing 10 damage to the Pikachu, but you were fighting, it would actually be 20. If you're going to do 30 damage to the Pikachu, and you were fighting, it becomes 60, and that's enough to knock out this Pikachu. Resistance is also something that can affect the damage values of an attack. So if you take a look at this Pikachu, it has resistance to metal by -20. So that means if there's any attacks that do damage from a metal Pokemon, subtract 20 from it. So if you were to do 30 damage to the Pikachu but you were a metal Pokemon, it would only be 10 damage. If it's 0 or less than 0, it effectively just does no damage. After you've applied weaknesses and resistances, and applied whatever damage you need to apply, check to see if the opposing active Pokemon has been KO'd. If there's enough damage on it to equal or exceed that Pokemon's HP value, which is in the upper right hand corner next to the type, then it is considered knocked out. It and anything attached to it gets discarded, put into the discard pile, and you get to draw one prize card. Of course, if it's your opponent's turn and they knocked out your Pokemon, you have to discard your active Pokemon, and they would get to draw a prize card. After the attack, your turn is over, and you pass it on to your opponent. Your opponent gets to go through their turn to see if they are any closer to winning than you are, and you will just repeat and pass back the turn back and forth until one of you is considered the victor, drawing your last prize card. Special conditions. For sometimes during an attack, you might get damage, you might not get damage, but there's also special conditions that can afflict your Pokemon. So the first three that we'll talk about are special conditions that will affect the status of your Pokemon: asleep, confused, and paralyzed. If your Pokemon's asleep, turn it sideways, usually to the left, and it cannot retreat or attack. In between turns, flip a coin. If the coin is heads, your Pokemon will wake up. Paralyzed. When your Pokemon's paralyzed, it's usually turned to the side, and it's usually to the right. And this is when your Pokemon cannot attack or retreat, but in between turns, it will restore itself back to normal. So it's only usually paralyzed for one turn. Confused. Confused is when your Pokemon doesn't know what to do. Usually you turn your Pokemon completely upside down. It can retreat normally, but if it tries to attack, it will flip a coin. If the coin is heads, the attack goes through normally, but if it's tails, the attack fails, you don't get any of the effects of the attack, including damage, and the Pokemon does 30 damage to itself. And that handles all of the status effects that affect the orientation of the Pokemon. So if any of those status effects happen to occur after another one, just take the latest one. So if your Pokemon was paralyzed and it becomes asleep, it is pretty much only just asleep. Okay, the other two types of special conditions are burned and poisoned. If the Pokemon is burned, in between turns, it will take 20 damage. However, after it takes 20 damage in between turns, you'll flip a coin. If it's heads, remove the burn token and it's no longer burned. Note that you cannot be burned multiple times. You can either be burned or not burned, so you can't have 2 or 3 burn tokens on a Pokemon. If your Pokemon is burned while it is currently burned, the new burn token just supersedes any old ones. Poison. If your Pokemon is poisoned, you'll have a poison counter on it. If your Pokemon is poisoned, in between turns, it will take 10 points of damage. Same thing with poison. If your Pokemon is currently already poisoned and it becomes poisoned again, it does not become doubly poisoned. It is simply poisoned, and the second one supersedes the previous one. How to remove special conditions. If you are afflicted by a special condition, you can usually remove it by one of two ways. You can evolve a Pokemon. Usually on evolution of any Pokemon, it will remove all special conditions. That's one way. Another way is to bench your Pokemon that has the afflicted condition. So any Pokemon that is retreated back to the bench, all of the special conditions will. Removing special conditions can be done by evolving a Pokemon or benching that Pokemon. The one thing about Pokemon TCG, when you're flipping coins, whenever you flip a coin, the easy way to remember how the outcome is determined is if you happen to get heads, heads is usually the good or desirable outcome. And if you get tails, that's usually the bad thing that happens. But if you end up having to flip a coin and you don't know, that's usually the easy way to remember it. There are some weird circumstances in which if you happen to flip the coin, you actually want the bad thing to happen, but those are very specific. So just take it at face value and just assume that the immediate good thing is heads. Now, getting all of your prize cards is pretty much the primary way to win Pokemon TCG, but actually there's a couple of alternate ways to win as well. One of the ways is if you happen to knock out all of your opponent's Pokemon and they have no more, even if you don't have all of your prizes yet, if they don't have any Pokemon, they can't battle, therefore you win. And then the other way to win is if you have an opponent that needs to draw a card at the beginning of their turn during the first segment where they have to draw a card, and they can't, they lose the game. So I originally set out on making this video and I wanted it to be a full tutorial, but didn't have time for that. It doesn't feel like a tutorial. So I decided that the style of this is basically just like a gameplay reference. So here it is. My apologies for not having video all the way through because my camera is dumb and sometimes eats like a bunch of stuff in between. And then also there was some that I did not actually get any real footage of, so I just filled it in with audio and my voiceover. So hopefully you're not objectionable to my voice, and that's why you get that. But anyway, if you are still watching and / or listening at this point, thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you found it useful. And have a glorious day.